Very excited for this next conversation to talk through the ETF and what comes next with Christopher Giancarlo, who is the former chairman of the US Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the co-founder of the Digital Dollar Foundation. Christopher, what's your take on what's happened with this ETF? There's been a lot of excitement. The industry's pumped about it. They think this is going to underpin the next bull run for these cryptocurrencies. What's your take?
Buongiorno, Arjun. It's great to be with you here in St. Moritz. There's a lot of dimensions to this. I think many people have commented on its ramifications for trading markets and for retail investment into this asset class. The area that I've been focused on, though, is thinking about digital currency generally and Bitcoin specifically, and its role in the global financial system, specifically related to traditional currencies, fiat currencies, like the dollar, like the euro, like the Chinese yuan. As you know, I think there's been a global debate as to whether crypto and Bitcoin specifically are threats to digital currencies. And I think one of the things that's played out here, one of the reasons why it's taken so long, 10 years in the case of ETFs, 5 years after we at the CFTC greenlighted Bitcoin futures, is a consideration as to whether crypto and Bitcoin specifically is a threat to major currencies like the dollars. And I think what the significance of this week's announcement is sort of a resolution of that issue, at least amongst the Biden administration, that Bitcoin and the dollar can coexist. This movement forward really is a signal that Bitcoin is here to stay, and any chance that a government like the U.S. might outlaw it is probably now put to bed.
From one former regulator to the current regulator, the SEC has got a lot of criticism from the crypto industry about its approach to regulation, that it's used enforcement rather than for regulation on the industry to foster innovation. What's your take on the way Gary Gensler and the SEC has approached the crypto industry over the past couple of years?
What I would say is this. 5 years ago, the CFTC, under my leadership, greenlighted Bitcoin futures. And 5 years later, that market is transparent, it's liquid, it's well-regulated, and it's relatively fraud-free. The CFTC demonstrated 5 years ago that U.S. regulators can engage with crypto and engage successfully with crypto by bringing it inside the regulatory envelope. My disappointment with the SEC, and I don't want to call out anybody in particular, my disappointment with that agency is that it's taken them 5 years to come to where its sister agency, the CFTC, was able to get 5 years ago.
Two interesting things happened yesterday. The price of Ethereum spiked on the back of the SEC decision, and then Gary Gensler came out with a comment effectively, and I paraphrase here, saying just because we greenlit these Bitcoin ETFs, don't expect us and the floodgates to open for a bunch of other digital assets. We still think Bitcoin is speculative, etc., etc. The excitement, those two things are linked. There's excitement and the industry's on tenterhooks that actually an Ether ETF could be next. Is that likely, in your view, given what you've seen?
Well, if you don't mind, I'll go back to my own experience. Once we greenlighted Bitcoin futures, there was a tremendous movement in the CFTC jurisdiction area for greenlighting Ethereum futures, and that did come 18 months later. It was 18 months, but it did come. I would be shocked if there's now a growing building of retail and institutional demand for an Ethereum ETF product, and I think the SEC is going to have to deal with that growing demand for that product.
I want to pick up on a point you talked about earlier, and that is the Bitcoin, the conversations that are being had around the coexistence of Bitcoin and the US dollar, that Bitcoin is not now seen as a threat to the reserve currencies of the world. You are heavily involved in research and projects around the digital dollar. How do we make a digital version of the US dollars? There's many trials going on around the world. We've seen it in China actually in action. We've seen the euro, etc., etc. What are the conversations? Where are we at on the path towards a digital dollar?
Yeah. Arjun, when I left the CFTC at 2019, I created something called the Digital Dollar Foundation with some former colleagues of mine. And the Digital Dollar Foundation, the Digital Dollar Project, exists to ask the following question. And that is, how do we future-proof the dollar? How do we preserve its reserve currency status? And how do we enhance the principles that I believe the dollar stands for? Principles of free commerce, of international trade, of free enterprise, and a reasonable degree of privacy for lawful transactions, economic privacy. How do we do so in a world where value is increasingly becoming decentralized and also moving on to centralized systems of value, some run by governments like the digital yuan or the digital euro, and others run by private enterprises like stablecoin operators? That's the question we need to be asking, not really whether the U.S. needs to deploy a digital dollar, but what does the U.S. and I think the globe need to do to make sure that in a digital networked world of money, that the dollar remains an important pricing tool, an important transactional tool in the world. And that's a question I think is not being asked enough.